Dear Ingrid, thank you so much for your invitation. And I would like to start to talk to you from your book for children,
Yes.
book Oli Koni.
It's called Oli, Konijn, Eend, Pauw,
Yeah.
Panter.
This book is about unusual animal.
Yes, well, an unusual... It's like a story of La Fontaine, actually, you know. It's on rhyme, and it's about animals, but of course it's not about animals. It's about people, and it's about a little animal that has the ears of an elephant and the pouch of a kangaroo and the skin of a panther, you know, who has all these combined things, and therefore is not accepted neither by the elephants nor by the kangaroos nor by the ducks, you know, because he still has some strange components, and at the end he's so sad and so angry that he leaves the land which is where everything is so called as it should be, namely that everyone is the same, and he goes and finds another land where you can be different, where all the animals are different, where the flowers are different, where the trees are upside down, you know, where the roses grow on clouds, and he finds happiness there.
But first, he felt himself maybe so sad, yes, because
Yes.
Society could not accept him.
Well,
his difference.
There were different reasons why I wanted to write about that. One is a book we can perhaps talk about later, which is Papavers, about my stepson who was mentally ill and who was very different, and how society copes with someone like that. And at the same time, here in Belgium, as in many other countries, there was a reluctance to let people from abroad in. There was some animosity against everyone who was not Belgium, not Flemish, not, you know, even if these people wanted to go somewhere, as there still is up until today, you know. And all these people traveling around the world, belonging nowhere, searching for a home, for a place to stay, and people having it very difficult with accepting them. And at the same time, but that I found out actually when I went to schools and talked about this book, is that children can be very cruel to each other when they are a little bit different, when they are, you know, too fat, or their hair is not as it should be, or I don't know what, or their skin is not, has a little bit different color. So it is a book about all that, actually. Yes. You get sad, and I always say to the children, okay, what would you feel? And they start with saying, I would be sad. And I say, just sad, and then they say, and I would become angry. And I understand.
Yes, but your book has a happy end.
It has a very happy end, because he finds this beautiful land where everyone can be as he or she is, and they like each other that way. And the animals who come from abroad start liking this country so much that it becomes too small, and they have to open the frontiers.
Yeah. So the moral is you must love yourself, yes, maybe, and
there's no reason why you shouldn't love or admit someone who's different. I don't like to give answers, I like to ask questions. But one thing I can say is that I've become much richer by meeting people who are different than me, by going to countries who are different than ours. So that's enough for an answer, I think.
Great, great. And the second book is Papavers. Yes,
Papavers,
yes.
It's a symbol of life, that is very beautiful, very blossoming, and very short. And it is a book that made a very big difference in my life and in my writing. Not so much the book as the reason why I wrote it, which is I had a stepson who became mentally ill and at the end committed suicide when he was in his 20s. And I had written at that time 2 short story books. And then this drama happened, and for a few years I couldn't write. I couldn't write also practically because, you know, when he came out of the institution he had to have a home where to come to, so he came to his mother or he came to us. And also because, well, all your life changes, your social life changes, you know, you can't, people don't accept that, don't feel comfortable, and I understand, absolutely.
No friends?
Well, you learn to know who your friends are and who are not, I think. And so it got worse and worse, and he did some very foolish things, and at the end he committed suicide. So that took a few years, and after that I had some time, I needed some time to, you know, cope with all this. And when I started writing again, I wanted to write about something different, but it all came in again, and I thought, I cannot write a story about this. This is so hard, you know, you can't make it into a story. So I decided to write a book about it, because that was a way of keeping him. It was a way of, he liked to write but could never finish anything, so I considered it his book also. And I hoped it would help people in understanding what mental illness and what schizophrenia was. We knew very little about it at the time, and it was that made it extra hard, you know. And I think people know a little bit more now, but at the time not very much, so I hoped it would help them also. And then I wrote this book, and of course my life was never the same after that, and I think it changed my writing too. And but after that I wanted something light, so I started writing these 2 children's books. So as a career planning, it's absolutely the worst you can do, you know, like write 2 short stories, wait for some years, write a book that isn't so simple, and then write 2 children's books.
Yeah, but it's great. It's a great book. And
no, I would rather not have written it, but I'm glad I did.
Yes. And you decided to change the minds of people, ordinary people.
No, it's not that I decided to change the minds of people, but I think I've always been one who asks many questions, and I think after that I even ask more questions. And do not accept that that people just take what is most evident.
Great, great. And what kind of questions did you ask?
Oh, I do. I think you can't live without asking questions. So everything, everywhere I go, every book I write starts with a question, with wondering. I think wondering is very important, you know.
Absolutely.
Not saying, okay, this is the world, this is me, this is you, okay, all right. No, it's a wonder. It's a wonder that the world exists, that you exist, that we exist.
You try to wonder people.
I try to do that,
story.
and I try to ask questions like, Is this normal what we do? Is it good what we do? Is it wrong? And why? I ask the questions I ask myself, I think. I think doubts are much more important or more interesting than knowing things for sure. Yes, yes.
But the end of this book is not happy.
No, the end was not happy.
Yeah.
Of course not. No. No, you can turn that back. You can only do, even with something that is very unhappy, the only thing you can do, and that is something I wrote in another novel I wrote afterwards, is try to make something good out of it. That's all.
That's good. And your next book, which I keep in my hands, it's a Cruel Bird.
No, that was my second book.
Yes,
actually. It was one of the short story books. Yes.
But we see a statue of a goddess of
vengeance.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if it's a statue of a goddess of vengeance. It made me think of it because some of the stories in short stories deal with this idea that you find in Greek mythology of a goddess of vengeance, and in other mythologies, and which always asks the question. Here we go again. Of do you have the right of vengeance, or is it not so much vengeance as rechtvaardigheid, justice?
Yes. And what is your answer?
It depends. It depends, of course. Yes. Vengeance itself is not interesting, I think. I think it's not a good feeling.
But
I understand that some people have it, this feeling of vengeance, but I don't think it's a positive feeling.
Yes, it's not a positive feeling, but it's a kind of justice.
Yeah. It can be a kind of justice if it's not, well, perhaps if it's violent, sometimes it can be a kind of justice too, but as I don't like violence, I'd rather have it the other way, you know. And the vengeance in the book is not always, sometimes it is a violent vengeance, but sometimes it is a very beautiful vengeance. Like choosing for something that risks to disappear, that we risk to lose, and then choose for it and nurture it. That can be a sort of vengeance too, you know?
Yes, but as for revenge,
a good one.
Yes, good one. But
revenge, yes.
But when people face with some crucial crimes,
yes,
like murders,
yes,
killing, they feel great anger, and think about revenge.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Yeah.
And about punishment.
Yes.
Very strong.
Yes.
And
yes. Yes.
Sometimes unbelievable.
Yes, but it doesn't help.
It doesn't help.
It doesn't help. That's what's so beautiful and so tragic about. I understand very well the relatives of these men who are being killed by IS, you know. But you have two kind of reactions there. You have the parents or the relatives who say, I want to kill them as well, you know, and it can be too hard, and I want I want to do the same to them. But you also have from time to time a mother, even a mother, who says, I forgive them. I just wished it would stop.
Yes.
Which is heroic, I think.
Yes.
And finally the only solution.
Yes.
Stop. Stop. Stop this circle.
But it's a great experience, and you have to have a big heart and big faith, maybe, in God.
I don't know if I could.
Yeah.
I'm not a believer, but then I don't know if I could.
Another book is about ageism, maybe.
Ageism.
Yes.
Becoming 60.
Yes.
Yes.
And of course, ageism exists.
Yes.
And people have a lot of stereotypes, prejudices, and barriers.
As they have with all things.
Yes, and conflicts between different generations, maybe
Yes.
children and
Yes.
parents. Yes, but what do you think about this issue? About
Well, I see people, I don't see ages, and I don't see sexes. It's like I just see a person, and it doesn't make a difference to me, you know? As the skin doesn't make a difference, as the culture doesn't make a difference. It makes it hard to understand, perhaps, but then you can talk about it. And I wrote a novel, for instance, about 6 people who were locked in a train by a bomb alarm. 6 people who didn't know each other, who were very different, who wouldn't talk to each other normally, and who started to talk because they were stuck in that train for a whole day. And one of these people is a very old woman and a very young girl. And they end up discovering that they have much more to say to each other than they would ever suspect that they had. And of course, in normal life, they wouldn't even have talked to each other. So I always had this idea. And then I wrote a diary the year I became 60, because everyone around me seemed to find that very weird or exceptional or I don't know what. And I didn't think one moment that this would be a special year. So I started to have to hold this diary and wrote down every day what I did and looked around to aging people and other people and to what magazines and newspapers wrote or what television said about aging and about Botox and should we or should we not, these completely crazy things. And I thought, well, after 1 year I'll take all this together, you know, like you have fallen leaves together and you know what autumn is, so I will take this together and I will know what 60 is. And so I wrote a diary about it. Yes.
It's a cult of beauty exists, you know, and perfectionism, and everybody wants to be young and beautiful, nice, but they forget that all of us will die.
Of course.
And they don't think about death. And
but that was strange. It's strange you ask it, because that was the, you know, in every book it's always like that. You start writing a book, it's always like that with me, and then halfway you suddenly discover, oh, this is what this book is finally about. And during that year, in the month of March, people around me, well, it's strange to say people around me started dying. It's not like that, of course, but there were some people who died who I found in one way or another significant in my life, in different ways. There was a stepsister of mine who was very young, who was hardly 40 and who had 2 children, and she had cancer from in her 20s already, and she decided she wanted euthanasia. She wanted to stop with her life. In that same month, Hugo Claus, which is a very renowned Dutch Flemish writer, and who had Alzheimer, had euthanasia too. So that was 2 times, and they had it in the same week, and they had their burial service, memorial service at the same place. Not at the same time, but at the same place. So there I was again, you know. So my mother, which was almost 80, fell very badly and was that same week in hospital. And then the wife of another writer, which we knew very well, which were good friends of us, died too. And so suddenly I realized that this also was part of becoming 60. Namely, you are the next generation to die. You go further, you know. And I think it was a shock. Of course, it's a shock when you realize it. But in a certain way, at the other hand, everything becomes so precious because you are much more aware of what you can lose and how precarious everything is, you know. And it helped me a lot. At the end of that year, I went to Bali for 1 month because I wanted to write a book, a completely different story, which plays mostly in Bali. And I came in a culture which is absolutely different, which has an entirely different way of looking to life and death. Namely, a way of life where people are not so individually important as they are in the West. We think, I am important, I want to have my freedom, you know, and we hardly, when people are old, we put them in an institution. When they are crazy, we put them in an institution, you know. Well, it's changing, but then it's hard to be allowed to die at home, you know, to accept these things. And in Bali, all that was much more different. Of course, the social control was also much greater. It's always the two things. And at the same time, it's a different way of looking at death. They know you are just one point in a line of history. And you die, but what you are doesn't die. Well, of course it dies, but what you have meant goes on. They believe it more literally, which I don't, of course. It translates itself in all these rituals they have. For instance, if someone dies, they have a big, very beautiful party, and they are grateful for what a person has been. Of course they are sad, of course they are, but they say, you don't show that, don't show your tears, because it will make the person who goes much more difficult to go.
Yes, nice.
And every year, and we were there at the time, every year, during 10 years, they have a festivity, which is the festivity of the ancestors. And they make a very beautiful table, they dress it, they make lots of foods, and during 10 days, all the ancestors come back, you know, and they have a very big dinner with them. Of course, the ancestors don't eat, they eat it afterwards. Yes. But it's like they come back every year, and every year it's not like, oh well, they're gone, you know, and once from time to time we go and visit their grave or we think about them. No, they do it very, very consciously. Yes. And the way you live and the way you live with them contributes to that, which I think is a very beautiful philosophy.
Yes, yes.
And which put, for me also, everything in another perspective.
Yes, but Europeans are more rational, yeah?
They are more rational, they are much more individual, and I think, and of course, since in the West people are so self-centered, you tend to think this is normal. And there we come again by being different. by traveling you discover it is not like that. I discovered this Hindu culture in Bali. I went to South Africa where 2 of my books were translated, and of course I knew something about, and where I have friends, and of course I know something about South Africa, but when you go there you see what it really means. And one of the philosophical words there is what Mandela also uses, which is Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is an African word which means I am because of what you are, or because of what we are, and we are because of what you are. And you cannot, put that apart. It is together, it is always together. Perhaps for a little part I will not be the same anymore when you leave this evening. And it will be the same for you, I think. So everyone you meet, of course, it isn't so much so, I think, when you choose to live a very superficial way. But even then it is so. Even then it is so. We affect each other.
Ingrid, you have started to talk about your next book, Double Spor. It's about people who met each other in a train, in a vehicle.
Yes, yeah.
And they did not know each other.
No.
They were like strangers. And after some accident or incident, they became like relatives. Yes?
Well, not all of them, but it's like what I said before, at the end of the day, they are all changed a little bit or a little bit more, and some very much.
So, what was the idea of your book?
I had the idea at the time when I personally was stuck in a train for, I don't know, an hour or 3 or so. And I heard the conversations of people around me. And I realized that some people didn't know each other and would never have known each other, And it's very often you have like something strikes you, and then when you keep thinking about it, and it keeps, it keeps your mind busy, and it generates enough questions, then sometimes it becomes a book. And in this case it was, what is the role of coincidence? What is the same thing, what separates people and what brings people together? How is it that we think that we have nothing to offer or to share with other people, whereas perhaps we do? And also the fact that by being stuck in a train, all these people were on their way to something. They had a goal. Yeah. They wanted to get there, achieve that, And by being stuck, they start to think and see themselves and realize sometimes, or at least ask, is this really so important, what I am going to do? Do I want to get there? And why? Oh. It's a moment of, meditation. It's a big word that very often we don't take the time to have. Yes. We just live our lives and we go on and we say, oh, I'm doing my career, or I am in this marriage, and you never, stand still and think, oh, is this really what I want? Am I really the person I want to be? And that's, for me, that's what the book is about. At least you should try to do that, to ask yourself, why am I here? What am I doing? What do I want? And I don't mean materially. For me it's not that important. I mean other things.
Yes. And you travel a lot. You went around the world.
I traveled a lot. Of course, during some periods of my life, like when our stepson was ill, or when other relatives are ill, you cannot travel, you know. But yes, I like to travel very much. Yes.
Yes, and you visited a lot of countries.
I
maybe.
did. I did some during holidays. And I did some, I used to be a journalist, so I did some for my job. And not always the most evident countries. So for instance, I went to Libya when Gaddafi was still in charge. I went to the southern states of Russia when Gorbachev came just in power there. I went to East Berlin when there still was an East Berlin, when the wall was there. I went to Uzbekistan, to places where, well, not the most evident things, you know. It's,
great. You were a witness of historical changes.
Yes, and I'm fascinated by how other people live, by how other cultures function. It helps to see yours in a more relative way. It enriches you, and I think, in fact, I think that every child of every youngster should at least, it should be like languages or like mathematics, what you learn in school, you should at least travel also.
Sometimes I think about folk and crowd, and they're not outstanding people, but they are necessary for outstanding people to be like a background. No.
Yes, and sometimes these outstanding people are good people, are people with a vision, and sometimes these people are very awkward people, and the awkward people also need little people to help them in power or stay in power.
Yes.
And that's the choice that the little people have.
The next book is about new man.
Yes.
Who is a new man?
Well, that's what I wondered. So at a certain time, some years ago, all the newspapers were, and magazines and television stations were writing and talking about this strange phenomenon, new man, which was a man who was not like men used to be traditionally. A man who was sensitive, who took care of his children, who knew how to cook, who who did all the things that normally women used to do. So I thought, well, it's always a question. The question was, does he exist? And if so, what are the consequences for women, for households, for the professional world, for society? Because if there is something like a new man, there of course must be a new woman too. And I think in a way you see things changing. You know, we had a prince at the time who is king now, Philip, and he had a little baby, and he walked around with this little baby. So that was something that was never seen before, you know. A man doing that, a prince doing that. So it was atypical in both ways. So that is why I wrote the book.
Yes, but do you prefer a new man or a traditional man?
Well, as I said, I do not consider people in the way being a man or a woman, we are much more than just that, I think. And we are much more, we are composed identities. We are not just a man or not just a woman, or not just new or not just old, you know. And I think it is a great richness to be able to be all that. So I think it is important for a man to show his feelings, to be able to show his feelings. And perhaps it is important for a woman to be able to say from time to time, now it's my turn, you know. I have the same rights. Of course you have. Why shouldn't you? You don't want them? Okay, you don't want them. It's important, I think, to have as many choices as you can have, as much ways of expressing yourself as you can have, or as you want, you know. But of course you must know what you want and balance it with how you live with other people. So there's no one recipe, I think.
Yeah.
Otherwise we would have found it and everyone would live like that. Luckily there isn't, you know.
Of course, of course. And to be some kind of phenomenon, maybe, yes? To become a phenomenon.
What then?
Not to be like others. Right?
Yes, why not? Why not? Why not? Yeah. No. It can be scaring for some people who want everything to be, you know, as it was, as it has always been.
Standard.
But then there's no evolution, there's no... this is death, I think.
Yeah.
Everything stops. That's death.
It's dead people. Your next book about Bali, a man who found his own destiny.
Yes.
And it's very important
I think so. Yes, but it's not evident, you know, because I started, well, the book originated one day when I met his mother, who died in the meanwhile, at the corner of the street here, and I hadn't seen her. She was she used to write about music. She was a piano player, and I said, well, how are you? Because I hadn't seen her for a long time, and she said, you don't want to know what happened to me. And then she started telling things, and one of the things she told was that her youngest son lived in Bali and married a temple dancer and lived there in an art center and became a masker dancer himself. And she showed me the photographs of the marriage, which was like a fairy tale, you know, with all these colors and gold. And she started describing how many days this lasted, and she said, I've always known that my youngest would leave, that he will not stay here, and that he was always attracted, even as a very small boy, to the East, to the Orient. He used to walk barefoot. He had always, the children he played with were children from China or you know, he always had something like this, and he ended up doing Eastern philology and traveling, went to China, that wasn't what he looked for, went to other countries, and finally, the moment he set foot in Bali, he thought, this is where I have to be. This is my destiny. So this was what triggered me, like, is it possible to find your destiny? And of course, the role of coincidence again in that. And the question kept me company for some time, so I ended up calling his mother and saying, well, you know, what you told me about your son finding his destiny keeps me busy. And she said, oh, what a coincidence, you're calling me now. He's arriving tomorrow with his wife in Belgium. So that's how we met, and that's how I ended up living in Bali for a month in that art center with all these people, traveling around, going with the orchestra, with the masker dancers, to all the performances they did, because they perform like in, well, popular theatre, not the open air theatres of course, festivals, but they also perform for very religious reasons, for marriages, for burials, for baptizing children. And the way they dance and the way they perform and the way they play music is part of this ritual. I mean, if they don't dance well, if they don't, you know, perform well, then the spirits will not go up so well, or the marriage will not be so good, or the children will not blossom so well. So that's what I believe. So it's all, you know, linked together. Yeah. So it's also very much a great conscious way of doing everything you do.
Yeah.
Because everything you do is important. For instance, they make little offerings every day. Incredible, beautiful little offerings, you know. And not one, no, tens of it. And they put it in the temples, and they put it on every door, on every trespass. So it's like every time you cross something, you should be aware of what you cross. And they put these little offerings in temples, and some morning we were having breakfast there, and in comes this woman with the offering, and she goes to the little altar, which was on the side, and she puts it there. And on this plate are flowers, there's essence, you know, burning. There's a little cup of coffee for the god, but he gets his little cup of coffee, which is so sweet, I think, and some food, some rice, some meat, and she puts it there, and she goes away. And she goes away, and in comes a little mouse, well, a rather big mouse, trip, 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 and she walks, you know, to the altar, and she eats it, and goes away. Oh, I said, oh well, we would be a bit scandalized, perhaps, by this little mouse eating the foods of the gods, you know. No, not for them, because this is part of, it is for the little animals too. You know, it's all intertwined, it's all together, and that is so beautiful, I think. Of course, it's there's the danger of the Western invasion, because they have this tourism coming from the south with all their dollars, you know, and you see the island change. We were in the north, and I didn't see a tourist the whole month when I was there, because they live still in their tradition, the place where I was. And that is why this Master of Arts, not the one my book is about, because he works there, but this Master of Arts, which is like his mentor, that is what this man tries to do, that is to save the Balinese culture for what it is.
Yes.
Because it's so precious, you know, and if these tourists come with their Bermudas and their bikinis and their dollars, this gets lost.
Yes.
And you see it happen. So, and with it comes consumerism, and with it comes plastic, you know, junk, and they don't know where to leave it, because they've never had it, so they drop it everywhere, and it's getting one of the big problems, you know. So it's all, it has two sides. But I'm very glad I learned a lot of it, personally, yes, from that philosophy. In the train book, there's one of the 6 people is a writer, and someone of the other people asks him, what is a good book? And he starts, you know, jokingly, like a book that smells good, because that's what and I'm not the only one, you always smell. Does it smell good? And he ends saying, well, a good book is a book that changes your life. And of course, I don't pretend writing books that change other people's lives, but I know very well that every book I've written is a book that changed my life. because you start the book with questions and you go, you know, your way and you find out things. And so you're not the same anymore after finishing a book.
You wrote about many things.
I wrote very different books,
Yes.
and as I said, it's perhaps not a very good career planning, you know, because it's more difficult to say, oh, she's that kind of writer, point. But I don't mind.
Yes.
But I don't mind.
But
As long as I write the books of which I think I should write them, and I want to write them, and when I have the chance to do that,
yes.
that's the main thing.
Your book, Sam,
Yeah,
it's based on a real story.
it's based on a real story.
Yes.
Yeah, it's my first children's book, and I started writing it after I wrote Puppies, you know, about the tragic death of my stepson. And after that long and very heavy period, I wanted something lighter, and then I remembered a story that I was told once, a true story, and I just knew very little of it, which is, it was about a little French girl who lived with her parents and her little sister in China at the end of the 19th century, and she got, for her 8th birthday, she got a little baby elephant. And not long afterwards, the father died. He was an architect who worked there, helped building a port, and the mother returned to France, to Paris, with her 2 little girls, and they took the little elephant with them. And they put it in their garden in an area, a well-to-do area of Paris. And of course it couldn't stay there because the elephant became bigger and bigger, and they ended up bringing it to the Jardin d'Acclimatation, which is a kind of zoo in Paris, and the little girl went to see her elephant there every day. So that's all I knew. And I started doing research. I traveled. I went to an orphanage in Sri Lanka for little elephants and gave them, you know, the bottle of milk and all that. And I also found the granddaughter of that little girl in Paris, who told me about her grandmother, how that had been. I went to the Jardin d'Acclimatation. I went to the zoo in Antwerp and talked to the what they call the man who takes cares of the very big mammifers, they say in English. Yeah. Yes. And he told me about his adventures with elephants, and so and I looked up history, because this was the time when the Eiffel Tower was built in Paris, and it was not finished yet, and the people at the time thought it was absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
They wanted it not to be finished, you know. So you need to know all these things, and then 5 lines of all you've done as research get in a book. But it's a wonderful story. It's like a gift you get, you know, when you... And then I incorporated little elephant stories from different cultures. Yeah. Some African, some Indian. So there's always this otherness. You know, of course it was like being mentally ill is other, is different. But the same thing here. This little girl was in China, because I discovered, which is absolutely incredible, when I was in that zoo in Paris, at the time, they exposed not only animals but also people. So they exposed Eskimos or Indians or Pygmies, and people came there to see these people, like they saw animals, you know. And I thought, well, this is not what they have done in China with these French people, but we do it. We this otherness, you know. Oh, strange, you know. We look at it as if they're animals. And the little girl also was looked at differently, because she came from a culture that they didn't know in Paris. She had lived there, and they didn't believe her. She behaved differently, she dressed a little bit differently, and then she told at school she had an elephant, which absolutely no one believed, of course. So this otherness came very quickly in the story also. Yes, and it kept on going. in all my books. When you write books, you live different lives.
Yeah.